Hi Jens, amazing to have you here. How are you today?
Hi Veronica, very good to see you. Everything's all right here in Berlin.
Awesome. You are sitting in Berlin. Okay, amazing.
Yes, we're in Berlin, in lovely Schöneberg.
Great. Yeah, it's great to have you in the interview today. We have a very exciting topic, which is understanding the effectiveness of your demos. I mean, I honestly, as probably everyone knows already, definitely have a strong bias towards the topic. I mean, software demos is my all-time favorite topic.
And it would be surprising if not.
No, I mean, that's serious, right? I mean, software really has the potential to change all our lives for the better, and it already does. Software already does. So I think like having the ability to properly showcase and demonstrate your software and what your software can do to your business is of utmost importance, and also, of course, impacts every aspect of our lives, not only like companies that want to sell something, but also companies that want to improve our processes. So I think it's a super interesting topic, and yeah, it would be awesome if you could just briefly introduce yourself. You also have a lot of experience in the sales space and also have great knowledge on sales processes. If you want to give us some background about yourself, what you've been doing for the past years, that would be amazing.
Great, sure. Yeah, my name is, as I said, Jens Hutzschenreuter. I do have a background in engineering. Somehow I ended up in management consulting. So I worked 7 years for the Boston Consulting Group. There I predominantly was working on sales and marketing topics, usually always connected to B2B businesses, a lot in the energy space, quite a lot in the automotive space, but also like automotive suppliers, industrial clients, etc. So I've been always connected to the field of like sales and marketing. But ultimately, I didn't stay in consulting. I started the first company in 2010 called City Deal, which was a company based on the Groupon business model from the US. Together with a couple of colleagues, we started the company both in London, in Berlin, and in Paris. We then grew the company. Sold it to Groupon, and then I was working 4 years in total at Groupon, managing different countries, small sales teams from like 50 people up to 250 inside sales and outside folks over in Chicago. Towards the end, I managed here Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, the region. After 4 years, I was doing a lot of like B2B sales topics because obviously Groupon has a strong B2B sales aspect. Afterwards, I moved on. I ventured rather towards the automotive space, where I started a company around connected vehicles, where we extracted data from vehicles and sold the data worked with the data with large industrials like energy companies, fueling stations, insurance companies, etc. And there I was doing, again, as a founder, a lot of B2B enterprise sales. I was able to sell my shares, and now I have a company in Berlin called Digital Business Group. We do 3 different things. We do sales advisory, focusing and helping other tech organizations how to build a B2B sales engine or machine. We do have a recruitment company called Sales Potentials, and we're working on a software product for B2B lead generation as well.
Very nice. I think you're definitely very well positioned to help the listeners understand better how demos can be more effective. I mean, I also do have a consulting background, and in consulting, you also have the great chance to see a lot of different businesses and also see a lot of different sales processes in a lot of different industries, and to definitely also then have the ability to just compare what works well in certain environments versus which doesn't work well in others. So your expertise, years-long expertise at City Deal combined with consulting expertise is definitely something that sets a great basis for the entire topic. And yeah, so I'd like to just start with the topic that all of us have on top of their mind today. I mean, COVID and the situation around remote work has definitely changed the situation of how we work together. Definitely has changed the situations around the office. I mean, remote work is definitely the new normal today. And also sales teams definitely had to adapt to the new and the changing environment and had to adapt their demo processes. And that also, I assume, impacted a lot KPI tracking, documentation, and benchmarking, especially for the clients that you worked with. So it would be amazing if you could give more background about understanding the effectiveness of the demo as a whole and how that has changed in the recent environment and why it has become ever more important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have an interesting situation with our business because we have the luxury that we're working both with German companies, but also with North American companies. So both in the US, but also based in Canada. And from that, it's actually quite cool because obviously we have like very deep access to the CRM systems of our customers. So it's really fascinating that we're able to actually dive a little bit deeper and are able to kind of distill some trends and also think about like what's actually different between Germany and North America.
Very exciting,
I think essentially when I really think about the demo and like of course like customer preferences, a couple of things come into my mind. I think by now I just saw a really cool study from McKinsey who were actually looking into like how the B2B sales process changed, and they were actually like surveying 3,500 decision makers, so sales leaders, and they mentioned that like 96% of them by now have transitioned to a rather completely home office or partially home office model. So obviously that has changed dramatically. Maybe touching on one point that you mentioned earlier, and you were referring a lot around like software. But I think the interesting thing here in Germany for us is that you have a ton of different companies who are rather hardware-oriented companies. So now you have this their typical product base, which is like hardware-based, but a lot of them are now venturing more and more into the software side of business. So now they have to add the additional complexity of selling suddenly software on top of that. And because they were usually based on like outside selling and like showing these like measuring devices, sensor technology, whatever it is, and now you have this like software component on top, these companies have to dramatically change their sales approach. Because as you said, like a lot of SaaS companies, they are actually fine because they've been doing the inside sales model before. But these old school hardware companies, they actually have to completely change their model. But you were asking specifically about the changes that have been made, so I wanted to reference back to that. So one of the most important trends that we do see in the conversation, but also in the call logging and in like the analysis behind everything, is that there has been a dramatic shift between the like the outcome, the values, and the benefits that you're presenting with your software, changing from a rather revenue growth perspective to a more like cost and efficiency perspective. So because you now have to navigate through a time where the CFO will dramatically look into all kinds of like investments, and he will challenge everything that he gets on his table. You have to. A lot of companies are changing the way they're positioning their product, where maybe pre-COVID, you were able to show like revenue potentials, maybe stacked on top of each other in various kind of dimensions. Now, rather towards a perspective of where you should show and prove like efficiency gains and real efficiency gains, rather with a higher priority. So that's why also like your entire demo approach needs to change. That's why you need to like investigate during a demo way much more on how they will use these results, of what's important to them, etc., in order to ultimately then come up with a great business case that you developed in collaboration with your discussion partner. So that can be ultimately signed off by, for example, the CFO, who's ultimately responsible for cash preservation.
Yes, we also definitely see that. That of course a lot of businesses are more focused on reducing cost and increasing efficiency with the resources they have, rather than just investing money and just scaling a team. I mean, obviously it differs, right? We also do see certain companies who somehow benefit from the current situation and somehow have like a bigger demand for their software, because especially now a lot of companies do want to digitize their processes, and also very large enterprises, large corporations that actually lacked that anyway during the entire like period of the past 5 years, and now they like really need to like upgrade their entire stack very fast. And I mean, for those companies, maybe a different thing, but anyway, like the focus is more around efficiency. Did you also see a change in your demo to close process? So meaning that deals take longer, or that deals require certain things to get done or involve more stakeholders, or the other way around?
No, actually, we do see a longer sales cycle, or a longer cycle between demo and contract closed. Typically, we tend to look at it like for the next step, which is then just immediately after conducting the demo, rather towards like the project definition. So if you have a little bit more of a complex product where you need to tailor it and where you need to define actually where you want to apply it, and or the next phase until the offer really gets sent. So we definitely do see an increase. I just looked up some data, and we do see in our benchmark, specifically in like Germany, of roughly like 25% more time from demo conducted over to offer sent.
And what do you think is the reason for that? Is it because it's more difficult to get the budget approved, or is it because you have more stakeholders involved? Because I also heard some companies saying that maybe they sometimes even have a shorter sales process, a shorter sales cycle, because it's easier to get everyone in the same call. Whereas in the old world, you had to have a physical meeting. Of course, it's much harder to get everyone into the office and then also find a time where you can physically visit that person or that customer. But now in the new normal, you can just set up a video call and anyone can join from home. So the availability is way higher. But it seems that like for your clients in particular, that's not the case.
We do tend to see a rather an extension of the sales cycle, which obviously is kind of a little bit determined for how digital and how agile and how quickly available like all decision makers are inside an organization. So when we look at for the reasons behind that, we typically do see that like a lot of SaaS companies, a little bit selling more towards like the German Mittelstand, maybe more towards German enterprises. We do see that the overall experience of the organization in how to progress further, in how to manage the buying cycle or buying process after the demo typically gets a little bit more complicated. So everybody's like unsure right now, how do I have to assemble the buying center? Who needs to be in that buying center? What kind of like restrictions do we have right now when it comes to like business cases? Like what ROI do we need to show, or what kind of like added value do I have to show? And that tends to extend the sales cycle based on the conversations that I recently had. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. You already mentioned that you mostly work with North American or US-based customers, I assume, and but also with German customers. What is the difference that you briefly mentioned there before? I think that's one very interesting KPI, and that's like what I just briefly mentioned, the time and the effort between you conducting the demo until the offer really gets sent. And we have like an aggregate KPI, which basically looks at the amount of meetings and the amount of like tasks and activities that you need to conduct and to basically tick off in Salesforce. And we try to measure these kind of like interactions just to get like a rough indication of what happens between the demo and then when you really send the offer. And typically, both in Germany and the US pre-COVID, it was rather between like 3 to 5 interactions. It always depends on like how organizations measure that, if they put into each and every like task and activity, or if they rather add like the high level stuff. But let's assume it's like 3 to 5. And post-COVID, we actually do see, especially in Germany, an extension between 25 and 30%. So you end up with like 4 to 7 touch points between the demo and the offer which is actually sent. And the interesting thing is that in North America, this KPI actually remains constant. So in the US, that's like an indication, at least the way we look at data, is that they are quite experienced into that they have been doing this before, that they're quite experienced in how to manage this process further, and that the restrictions, the somehow uncertainty around the completely digital organization of a buying center is not as prevalent in the US in comparison to Germany.
Would you also mind sharing the sample size for the data that you just communicated?
I mean, it's our customer size. So we are in contact with 35 to 40 different SaaS companies, and we're able to dive into the data of those companies there.
Very interesting. So it's over 3 to 5, both for North American and German customers, in touch points from a demo to offer sent, or yes. That over a number also different for North American customers versus German customers?
Yeah, but the number is a little bit different, but that difference is not significant. So the range between 3 to 5, it's directionally it's identical. So if you would like statistically add it, with like 40 sample size, you wouldn't find a significant difference anyway.
Is there anything that you can do to help your customers accelerate that process, make that demo process easier, increase efficiency, and also ultimately increase conversion rates?
Mm-hmm.
And so what is that you help them implementing?
Very good point. I think it really starts with everything that you do in discovery. So even before you're actually going into a demo, of course, you want to be really, really well prepared of what they are looking for. So what are the different things that they're looking for? What's their landscape that they already have, etc. So that needs to be in order. Then typically what we do see is that we are coming up with different playbooks when it comes to like demos. So either you're going the route of like, hey, I really need to show some efficiencies, and I really need to show my product and highlight the use cases in my product for everything that shows like efficiency upside, or I need to showcase somehow that we're adding capabilities, that we're adding skills, or that we're adding features that the current sales team does not have and that they are lacking completely right now. So then you're suddenly an enabler, and then you need to position your product in a completely different way. So next thing will be sales playbooks, and the question in how you're helping the sales rep actually to move into one or the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third thing that we are applying is a rather thorough training when it comes to like, how do you ask about the further buying process? So which questions can I ask? Which questions should I not be asking? How can I position myself as an expert, that I've been through these like enterprise approaches so many times that I know exactly what needs to happen? Mm-hmm. And so you really have to equip your team with the right questions so that they can then gather all the relevant data that they would need to have in order to shrink the sales cycle again from demo to offer send.
Mm-hmm. I think definitely the topic around discovery is an amazing one. And depending on how the discovery went, you also have the chance before your demo even takes place to really like nail down the demo to the core pain points that your customer mentioned in discovery. So that's also what we praise a lot at Demodesk. I mean, sales demos, as previously mentioned, is at the core of what we do, right? So for sure, it's like the more you understand about your customer, and the more you know about your customer, what he is trying to achieve with your software, and also how you can make him successful with your software, I think the more likely it is that you actually get to close. I think it's also the most interesting thing about sales conversations is, and maybe not only about demos, but in general, and maybe not even only in sales, but also like everywhere, like in every conversation that you have. But when you understand what the person that you're talking to actually wants, and if you help that person on the other side to get what he wants, and you can use your software to help him achieve that, I think then you're almost there. And of course, you can only understand that when you do proper discovery. So I think that's, for me, like the greatest point. I mean, you also mentioned playbooks, and I would also be super interested in whether you're using different playbooks for North American clients versus German clients. I mean, of course, it always depends on the exact customer and the exact software, but maybe you see more structural differences in playbooks and sales approaches from one customer group versus the other.
Very good question. Let me quickly think through that. So what I do see is that if you're looking at the German-speaking market, I think there you are still doing quite a lot of like education. You're still doing quite a lot of like highlighting the context in how an application could be implemented, etc., etc. So at least what I see right now is that like German playbooks tend to be a little bit heavier on the basics, on the fundamentals. If you look at playbooks from the US, they tend to be like 2 to 3 years ahead. So like because the decision makers have been exposed through the last years about so many different tools, about like the problems, but also the benefits associated to like new tools, you actually do see that you can skip rather the basics and really go deeper into specific benefits and the resulting and the linked product features. So I would say that if you compare them side by side, German playbooks are potentially a little bit more focused on basics, on explaining, etc., because of the slightly lower sophistication when it comes to the buyers in comparison to what you would see in the US.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to highlight one point to the previous point that you made around like having sales conversations about like what your customer actually wants to do with your software. I think you could even extend it one step further, that actually really great sales teams, they have a very good and a very thorough understanding of how business models in itself actually work. So that you actually really understand, okay, so what is the kind of business model that my partner, that the person that I'm trying to help and trying to educate on my software, that they are actually using? Mm-hmm. Are they in the trading game? Are they at the private label game? Are they just about like generating leads? And based on like really the business model that they have, you can highlight certain aspects. Is it a highly capex intense or high investment business? Then completely different things come into play in comparison to if they have like a very transactional sales model in and out, and just basically need to increase conversion specifically during this rather short sales cycle. And really good sales teams, they also educate their sales teams about like how to think about business models, how to think about like value chains, how like industries work, etc. Because then ultimately you can have really salespeople having an educated kind of like an eye-to-eye decision maker or discussion, in comparison to just like I'm showcasing your product and I'm highlighting everything, all the great things that this great tool can actually do.
Mm-hmm. How do you measure effectiveness of the sales process? And like maybe in even more detail, how do you measure the effectiveness of a demo?
Mm-hmm. So typically we look at the, as I said, the conversion rate between a demo actually conducted and then offer sent. And then we peel the onion, I guess, like one step further. So we look at conversion rate, and then we look at like sales cycle, and then we tend to look at like a number of interactions, number of meetings that need to happen between the actual demo and then the offer sent. And then typically we try to compare that somehow to a comparable group of within, like, you rather have the transactional sales approach, where you have like maybe 0 to 3 months of a sales cycle. Then typically you can take the group of like mid-market sales organizations who tend to have between like 3 and 6 months of a sales cycle. And then the longest sales cycle, the typical, we would call it like the enterprise sales process, between like 6 and 18 months of a sales cycle, and then try to compare your conversion and your duration just within these kind of groups. Mm-hmm. And I think that's also highly crucial, because people tend to like grab information from the internet or tend to talk to people, but then you ultimately see that either the sales cycle is completely like different, or the life cycle stage of the organization is completely different. So then you're comparing yourself to a highly optimized marketing and lead engine machine, maybe KPIs that you see from Salesforce. But then it's like everything is like highly optimized. And then you are like a young founder, like very early on in your seed, pre-seed, or Series A phase. And then you try to get those KPIs together. And a lot of the cases you do see that, then the comparisons get really, really difficult to compare against.